The garden shouldn't have existed at all. Ilara had passed the iron gates 1,000 times in her 17 years, always averting her eyes from the twisted vines that choked the bars and the warning signs that had faded to illegibility decades ago. The Ashford estate had been abandoned since before she was born, a relic of a family that had vanished under circumstances the village elders refused to discuss. Children dared each other to touch the gates. Adults crossed to the other side of the street. But on the morning of the spring equinox, when mist rolled down from the hills like milk poured from heaven's pitcher, Ilara heard something that stopped her mid-stride. Music. Not the usual sounds of the village waking. No clattering of shop shutters or bleating of goats. This was something else entirely. A melody that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her chest. It was sweet and sorrowful, ancient and newborn, familiar and completely alien all at once. Her feet moved before her mind could object. The gates, which should have been locked and rusted shut, swung open at her touch with a whisper-soft sigh. The garden beyond was impossible. Where the village was gripped by early spring's timid greens and browns, this garden blazed with high summer. Roses the size of dinner plates cascaded over crumbling stone walls in shades that had no names, colors that existed in the space between purple and blue, between gold and light itself. Trees dripped with luminescent moss that pulsed with a gentle heartbeat rhythm. The air tasted of honeysuckle and something sharper, like lightning or prophecy. And in the center of it all, in a clearing where the morning sun broke through the canopy and cathedral shafts, grew a single flower. It stood no taller than Ilara's knee, with petals that shifted through the spectrum like oil on water. But it was singing. Not metaphorically, not in the way poets describe wind through reeds or bees in blossoms. The flower was producing actual music, a wordless aria that wove itself into harmonies no human throat could manage. Ilara approached slowly, half convinced she'd fallen asleep on her walk to the bakery where she worked. This had to be a dream. Dreams were the only place where the impossible wore such a casual face. "You can hear me," the flower sang, and though it had no mouth, no vocal cords, Ilara understood the words woven into its melody. "After all these years, finally, someone can hear me." Ilara's knees buckled. She caught herself against a moss-covered bench, its stone surprisingly warm beneath her palms. "I'm going mad," she whispered. "The flower dust has finally done it. I've breathed in too much and now I'm hallucinating." "You're not mad." The flower's song gentled, becoming something like a lullaby. "You're awakening. There's a difference, though admittedly, sometimes it's a fine one. Flowers don't talk. They don't sing. They don't—" Ilara pressed her hands to her temples, trying to anchor herself to something real. And yet here we are, conversing. The flower's petals rippled with what might have been amusement. "I am Melodia, last of the canter blooms, planted here by the Ashford family 300 years ago. And you are Ilara Thorne, daughter of Margaret, granddaughter of Eleanor, great-great-great-granddaughter of Elspeth, who was sister to Jonathan Ashford himself." The world tilted. Ilara knew her mother's name, of course, and her grandmother's. But the rest, the genealogy stretching back into history, was news to her. Her family had always been bakers, ordinary as bread, unremarkable as wheat. "That's impossible," Ilara said. But even as she spoke, she was remembering things. The way her grandmother's lullabies had made the bread rise faster. The way her mother could predict rain by listening to the wind. Small things, easily dismissed. Until now. The Ashfords were singers, Melodia continued, her melody weaving pictures in the air, or perhaps in Ilara's mind. Not ordinary singers, but weavers of sound, people who could manipulate reality through music. They could heal with a hymn, make crops flourish with a harvest song, ease a difficult birth with a gentle ballad. But power attracts jealousy, and jealousy births fear. Images flickered. A grand estate full of music, its halls ringing with songs that made the very stones content. Then angry faces, torches, accusations of witchcraft. A family fleeing in the night, scattering across the countryside, hiding their gifts beneath silence and ordinary lives. "They planted me as a guardian," Melodia sang, "as a beacon for the day when someone with the gift returned. I've been waiting, singing to the empty air, hoping. And now you're here." Ilara shook her head, backing away. "I can't sing. I mean, I can carry a tune, but there's nothing special about it. You've made a mistake." "Have I?" Melodia's question lilted upward. Then why can you hear me when no one else in the village can? Why does the garden respond to your presence? Alara looked around and realized with a start that it was true. The roses were leaning toward her, the luminescent moss pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Even the air seemed to hum with anticipation, waiting for something. I don't want this, Alara said, and was surprised by the vehemence in her voice. I have a normal life, a job at the bakery, friends who don't think I'm insane, a future that makes sense. Do you? Melodia's song turned gentle, almost pitying. Or do you have a half-life, a safe life, a life that fits neatly into the small space you've carved for yourself because you've always felt like you didn't quite belong anywhere? The words struck home with uncomfortable accuracy. Alara thought of the restlessness that plagued her, the feeling that she was always waiting for something to begin. The way music, any music, could move her to tears for reasons she couldn't explain. The dream she had of singing while the world listened and changed. What would you have me do? She asked quietly. Even if this is real, even if I have some kind of gift, what good does it do me now? The Ashfords are gone. The world has moved on. The world is dying, Melodia sang, and her melody turned dark, minor-keyed, threaded with sorrow. Can't you feel it? The songs are fading. The old magics are being forgotten. Soon there will be only silence, only the mechanical and the mundane. But it doesn't have to be that way. One person can't change the world, Alara protested. No, Melodia agreed. But one song can. One voice, singing the right melody at the right time, can rewrite everything. Alara sat down hard on the bench, her mind reeling. Part of her wanted to run, to flee back to the village and her familiar life, and pretend this had never happened. But another part, a part she'd always tried to ignore, was thrumming with excitement, with recognition, with a hunger she'd never acknowledged. If I wanted to learn, she said slowly, if I wanted to understand this gift, what would I have to do? Melodia's song brightened, swelling with hope and joy. You would have to listen, really listen, not just to me but to everything. The world is full of songs, Alara. The wind has a voice, and so does the rain. The stones remember ancient ballads and the rivers sing as they flow. You would have to learn their languages, their melodies. You would have to practice until your voice can shape reality the way a sculptor shapes clay. And then you choose. The gift can be used for great good or terrible harm. It can heal or destroy, create or unmake. Your ancestors chose to help, to serve their communities, to make the world a gentler place. But they paid for it with their safety, their home, their unity as a family. Alara stood, approaching the flower again. Up close she could see that Melodia was growing from soil that sparkled like crushed stars, that her roots extended deeper than should be possible in this shallow clearing. Teach me, Alara said, and the words felt like a door opening, like stepping off a cliff into flight. I don't know what I'll do with this knowledge, but I need to understand who I am, what I am. Then we begin, Melodia sang, with the first lesson. Sing with me, Alara Thorne. Let me hear your voice. Alara opened her mouth, and for the first time in her life, she didn't think about hitting the right notes or staying in key. She simply let sound pour out of her, raw and untrained but true. Her voice cracked and wavered, but Melodia wove around it, supporting it, teaching it without words how to find its strength. And as they sang together, the garden responded. Roses bloomed in accelerated time, opening and closing like breathing. The trees swayed though there was no wind. The very air shimmered with visible waves of sound. And Alara understood, really understood for the first time, that music wasn't just vibrations in the air. It was a fundamental force like gravity or light, capable of altering the fabric of existence itself. They sang until the sun was high overhead, until Alara's throat was raw and her legs trembled with exhaustion. But when they finally fell silent, she felt different, awake, alive in a way she'd never been before. That's enough for today, Melodia said, her own melody tired but content. Come back tomorrow, and we'll continue. But Alara, tell no one about this place, about me, about what you're learning. Not yet. The world isn't ready, and there are still those who would fear what you're becoming. Alara nodded, understanding instinctively that this was true. She made her way back through the garden, which seemed less wild now, more welcoming, as if it recognized her as something other than an intruder. The gates closed behind her with a soft click. The village looked exactly as she'd left it, but Ilara saw it differently now. She could hear the underlying melody of it, the rhythm of footsteps, the harmony of voices, the percussion of hammers and looms, and daily life. It was all music, waiting to be shaped, to be conducted. She went to the bakery, arriving hours late, but her employer merely raised an eyebrow and said nothing. Ilara worked through the afternoon in a daze, kneading dough with hands that still tingled from touching Melodia's petals, humming without thinking. The bread she made that day was the best the bakery had ever produced. Customers came back 3 times to buy more, saying they couldn't explain it, but this bread tasted like sunshine, like joy, like coming home. Ilara's employer noticed but asked no questions. Some gifts, his weathered face seemed to say, are better left mysterious. That night, lying in her narrow bed in her mother's house, Ilara stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd begun. Tomorrow she would return to the garden. Tomorrow she would learn more, and the day after that, and the day after that, until she mastered this strange inheritance. She thought about the future Melodia had implied, a choice between healing and harming, between hiding and revealing, between safety and purpose. It terrified her. It thrilled her. Outside her window, a nightingale began to sing, and for the first time, Ilara could hear the meaning woven into its melody. It sang of spring and mating and the fierce joy of being alive. She hummed along softly, and somewhere in the night other birds joined in, creating a chorus that swept through the village like a benediction. In the forbidden garden, Melodia felt the resonance of her student's voice and smiled, if flowers could smile. After 3 centuries of waiting, the cantor line was awakening. Whatever came next would rewrite more than just one girl's future. It would rewrite the world's song entirely. And in the morning, when Ilara returned to the garden as the sun painted the sky in shades of prophecy, her real education would begin.